So let's go to Canvas. Alright, so 1310, in the final assignment, I have put the cover sheet image. So that little 3D cabin thing, you don't need to generate that. So I'll come down here to final project, and you will grab it right here, front image, download. And you'll just get a JPEG, right? JPEG is same file type that your digital camera, phone, or whatever, right, outputs. So show in folder, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to go put it in the same folder that I'm generating my final project in. So I'm going to call a folder AutoCAD Final Project. Okay, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste it in there. All right. And so that's kind of the first step, okay? I'm gonna have to backtrack a little because I don't have a title block generated. Although I feel like we started drawing one, and I'm wondering if I saved that file. That would be amazing. No. Okay, probably not. So I'm gonna start a new title block file real quick. I'm gonna use my line tool. And I'll do an 11 by 17, so 10.5. Oops, nope. Hold on a second. By 16.5. I want to tell you guys, I had a couple of questions about this. Oh, Pauline's not here. For Pauline, if she listens to this recording. Oh, this probably should be here. And I've gotten it a few times. Some of you have made your title block slightly too large, and likely, not really by accident, but you know, I like to make it about a 1/2 inch smaller, right? So it's 10.5 by 16.5 instead of 11 by 17, right? But the problem with that is that when you print, well, let me do this real quick. Okay, so here's our title block, looks like that. And that's all I'm gonna do for my title block. So I'm gonna W block this and choose my pick point, click, select my objects, enter, and I'm gonna save this in my AutoCAD final project. We'll call this my 11 by 17 title block portrait. Okay, so there's my title block. Okay, I'm gonna delete that out. But when you are in Paperspace and you go to print, when you're at home and you use the DWG to PDF printer, I don't know if you noticed this, but it has a, well, it's not even showing very well in here. It has actually, oh, this is 8.5 by 11, but it has a slightly larger margin than the Adobe PDF. Okay, and so when you use this PDF generator, it will cut your title block off just a tiny bit because its margins are larger, essentially, right? So that's the problem. If you know your title block's the right size, right, but it's just a little bit too big for that printer, that's what's going on, right? But when you use the regular Adobe PDF, right, if you use this printer, you'll be just fine, okay? So if that happens, you'll just have to open up your title block and shrink it down just a tiny bit, like probably 1/4 of an inch will do it, I bet. Okay. All right. So I'm going to close out this drawing, and I am going to, I'm going to start the master file, and because my title page is in the master file, I'm going to start my master file, and I'm going to show you how to XREF some of these drawings together. Okay, and then I'm going to show you how to create the cover page. So I may spend like the next half hour or so going over that. I won't go through it all because you guys need to do it, right? But hopefully it will at least get you going on your final project, okay? Ideally, and I just want to save this first. Ideally, what would be great is if I could start with my template file, right, that had all my settings in it. So it had my layers, my dimensions, my text style, right, all my pages set up. If you've kept up on your template file, then you'll have that and it will work. If you haven't, then you could start with a blank file. And I'm just going to start with a blank file because I don't have a template file here with me, okay? So I'm going to click on Start Drawing. And I'm going to start by creating my master file, right? So I'm going to open this blank drawing. And if you had your template file, you wouldn't have to make any changes, but since I don't, I have to change my units. And eventually I'll have to create some layers and do different things, but first I just want to make sure I have my units set right. So I opened up a blank file. This is going to be my master file. This is where I'm going to XREF in all of my base files and print all of my PDFs from, okay? So I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to go to my final project folder. There you go. And I'm going to call this, you know, Final Project SB and save. Okay. So now if I look at my file structure, there is my final project. That's my master file. And actually I probably should have called it Final Project, like master file, to differentiate it, right? Oh, I have it open, so I can't do that. But I probably should have given it that name, right? So I could tell it, you know, tell it from the other files. I also have my cover sheet picture in there. I have my cover sheet picture in there because it just makes sense to save it where I'm saving my final project files. All right, so I have, yep.
Is that in one of the folders, or do you have to just get it off?
It's in the assignment on Canvas.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so I've got my master file done. And now, you know, I have to have some base files to XREF into that master file. And so if we look up here, you're going to have things, you're going to have 7 files: the X-site plan, X-details, the floor plans, the elevation section, interior elevation, right? We're going to have all those base files that we need to XREF into that master file. And ultimately, you know, let me see if I can kind of talk through this, right? Ultimately, all of those base files, they start with a blank file, right? And ultimately, that blank file, it would be great if it were your template file, right? Just like this master file. When I say that, I feel like it's a little confusing because you're thinking, well, the master file is where I XREF in all the base files. So why would I start with my template file on both of those things when they're different, right? But really, that template file is generic. It's just a start. You can turn it into whatever you want it to become, but it's a generic start for you, okay? So really, I'm going to close out my master file, and I'm going to open up my blank template file or whatever. Again, I'm going to make sure my units are changed because I don't have my template. File, Save As, and in my same folder, I'm going to call this X-site. Save. Okay, and because I haven't done anything in here, and this is kind of tricky, but it works really well, I can go File, Save As, and I can call the next one X-details, D-E-T-S, enter. Right? Now I look at my file structure and I have my master file, and I have my first base file, and now my second base file. Right? File, Save As. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute, they're blank, there's nothing in there, right? But that's great. I can open them up separately once I've created all of them and draw the, you know, pertinent information in each one, okay? So now we have floor plan 01, so X-FP01, file, save as, X-FP02, file, save as, X-elevation, E-L-E-V, file, save as, we've got X-section, and then one more save as, file, save as, X-interior elevation. Okay, I'm going to close those out so I have no files open in AutoCAD. And I'm going to look at my file structure. Detail, where's my detail? Oh, it's right there. Okay. So now as I look at my file structure, I have all of my base files, even though they're blank, right? But that's okay, because the way the system works is that I compile all these files into one master file, and as I change them, because they're XREF together, as I change and update them, they coordinate back to that master file, okay? So I've got my master file here. I've got all of these different drawings, right? And I'm just gonna, just for clarity, because I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna open up my master file. Okay. So I'm just going to go in order of drawings, right? The first thing I have is my cover sheet. Now, my cover sheet, it's not going to have anything really on it. It's going to have my title block on it. It's going to have an image on it, but there's not going to be any other type of drawing, right? One thing that you may have noticed that we didn't go over really when we talked about XREFs is the fact that in the external reference tool palette here, I can not only attach a drawing, I can also attach an image. So if I click on attach image, I can go to my final project, go to cover sheet, hit open, right? And hit OK, click, enter, enter, oops. And my image has now been inserted into my master file. Okay, isn't that great, right? Now here's the tricky part, right? I have my image in here. My other base files don't have anything in them. So when I insert them into my master file, if they're blank, they'll go in, but we won't see anything, right? Because there's nothing to see. But I am going to XREF all these together just for the sake of XREFing them together and showing you that when I update things, it all regenerates, right? It all works. All right, so next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna click on attach drawing. And I'm going to choose my first one. I'm just going to go in order, x-site, open. I want this to be no path. I'm going to do something a little different than we did in class. I'm actually going to choose to specify on screen my insertion point. And I'm only going to do that because the files are blank at this point, and I want to be able to click them in different spots in model space, as opposed to them all coming in and laying one on top of the other in the exact same spot. Okay? All right, so let's see, no path, attachment, okay. Now it says specify insertion point instead of just placing this in here. So I'm gonna click right here, click. All right, so there's my site plan, right? Okay, attach drawing. I'm gonna go with my details, open. And everything's, oh, that changed. Looks good. And I'm gonna click and place my details. You'll notice, and this is my workflow, it may not be your workflow, I tend to do similar tasks all at the same time, right? So if I am printing or if I'm creating sheets, like if I have 3 or 5 sheets, it doesn't matter. I do them all at the same time, right? Because I feel like it's quicker to do tasks that are similar all at the same time rather than to do one, get out of the workflow, go back, do it, you know? So when I'm XREFing, I'm like, hey, I'll just do them all at the same time, right? So we'll go and do our third one, which we'll do floor plan 01, open. Okay, hopefully I get these all in, 1, 2, there's 3. Hopefully I get these all in, not on top of each other, right? I guess the nice thing is I can always go back and move them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can see they're all attaching even though they're blank. And then we've got our elevation. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 2 more right here. Insert, attach drawing, elevation, and then we've got section. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right there. And then one more, which will be interior elevation, open. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right there, maybe. We're working with invisible entities, right? And there's nothing really there because there's nothing in those files, but there will be, right? So I look at this and I think, okay, I have some work to do, I have some drawing to do. While I'm in this master file, I'm going to set up my layout tabs. So I'm going to go into layout 1, right click, and go to page setup manager, new, 11 by 17 portrait, or wait, no, I did landscape, PDF. Now I could have gone the easy route and when I was in the layout typed Control P, right, and set up my page layout, but I have 7 or 8 of these pages to do. So if I set up, you know, hopefully this could have been in your template, right? But if I had set this up now, I only have to create a new tab, apply, create a new tab, apply, instead of applying all of the settings multiple times. So I've got my Adobe PDF. This is going to be 11 by 17, and it will be landscape, yes. Extents, center of the plot. This is 1:1. Okay, now I hit set current, and you see in the background it's set that 11 by 17 preset current. I'm going to right click on this tab and rename it. We can call this cover sheet. Okay, go to layout 2, right click, page setup manager. Now I can just click on this and hit set current, and it applies those same settings, right? And I can right click, rename, and call this site plan. Click on new, go to my layout, and it says, hey, oh, no, it didn't. I thought it was going to ask me for the layout. Page setup manager, set current, close, right click, rename, details. So I'll do all of these. Right click, page setup manager, set current, close, right click, rename. Okay, and in fact, I'm just going to stop there. So we have the first 4 done, and you would do all 7, right? So every single drawing has its own page now, right? Makes sense. I'll start with the cover sheet. Okay, so after I have my page size correct, which is pretty important, because if you don't have the page size correct, right, if it's 8.5 by 11, your 11 by 17 title block will be way too big for it, right? Or if you set it up and you get all your drawings on here, they're to a specific scale, you do your annotation, and then you realize, oh, the page is the wrong size, you have to go back and kind of redesign the layout of your page, which is a pain in the neck, right? So I've got my page size, it's the right size. I'm going to bring my title block in now. So I have my title block saved as a W block. On my, oh, I had one. There we go. Da, da, da. I should have looked at my block library, people. Oh boy. Okay, so I'm going to hit open, right? Hit OK, and I can bring my title block in there very nicely. Click, right? And I'm going to say again, your title block, it's brought into Paperspace, right? And I set my page up to be 11 by 17, so it very nicely accepts that, okay? Now, I'm going to make sure that I have, in my layer dialog box here, I'm going to make sure that I have a layer called viewport, and I'm going to make sure that layer is set to not print. Now, a little suggestion. I'm also, this is something we haven't talked, well, maybe we need to talk about this. I'm going to create another layer called reference. And I'm going to, you know, because my last layer had that setting, I'm going to make sure to uncheck that. Very important, right? But I'm going to make that my current layer. Click, click. And I'm going to put all my external references on that layer once I can see things in them, right? So they're just all grouped on one layer. I can, you know that they're visible, all that good stuff. So this block, oops. Oh, and in fact, I think I'm going to put my title block on the reference layer. And my viewport is going to go on the non-printable viewport layer, right? Looks pretty good. Click, click. And really, the cover page is just me, click, click, zooming into that image. That's it, right? It's in model space, and I'm viewing it through Paperspace. And so now if I were to print this page and preview it, it would look like that, right? That's how you get your page. Now, this line that's going around the edge of that image, it's not the viewport. It is actually, when you bring in a raster image into AutoCAD, it has a frame around it, okay? So that's actually the frame around the image. So there's a setting, of course, AutoCAD has a million settings. There's a setting that will allow you to turn that off, and it's called image frame. Image frame. IMAGEFRAME, image frame. Don't worry, I'm recording all of this, guys. And the toggle, well, this shouldn't have printed actually, funny enough. The toggle number, if you have it at 1, that means that the outline will show and that it will print. The toggle 2 will show it, but it shouldn't print. And if you type 0, the image, the frame around it will turn off and it won't print. So there's 3 settings. So I'm going to change it to 0, right? So if I try, oh, they changed it a little so that I can, it used to be that if you changed it to 0, the image frame would go away and you wouldn't even be able to grab these grips and alter the image, but it looks like they allow you to do that now. So I go back to my cover sheet now. Just gonna make sure my viewport is, yeah, okay. Just making sure my viewport is set to not print. Ideally, hopefully that doesn't print anymore. There you go. So the image frame has turned off, right? And that's really all there is to creating your cover sheet, okay? Is bringing that image into model space and viewing it through Paperspace, just like we do any drawing. Now, I'm gonna close this file, close and save. So now I have the master file constructed, and that's worth a lot of points in the final, right? So if you can do this, then it's good. You won't miss points on that, right? But I do look for it, and I can tell when they're blocked in. So just know, I can tell. But now I have to do some drawing, right? So I'm going to open up like my floor plan 01, right? And I think, okay, I have my master file constructed. Now it's time for me to do some drawings. So I'm not going to actually create anything special, but I am just going to draw a few things in here, right? There's our floor plan, right? I make some changes. I close it out. I save it. And now because that file is XREF'd into my final project, when I open my final project and I go to model space, there it is. It's gigantic compared to my little image over here, right? But, oh, and I think I probably spaced them too closely now that whoops. We'll deal with that in a second. It's only 11 feet. So that little guy's tiny. I like to, when I have tiny little objects, I like to draw a rectangle around them so I don't lose them in model space. So I might do that. But there's my floor plan, right? And if it's too close, I can M for move, and I can just move it over, right? All right, I'm going to close out of that file again. And I'm going to open up my details. Okay, and I'm just going to use my drawing tools to quickly draw some of those wonderful site details that we have to draw. There's one of them, right? And then maybe we have another one over here. Okay. When I'm done drawing, I close it and I save it. And I'm going to open up now my site. And the site plan, right? The site plans are always wonderful, and there we go. There's a site plan for all you civil engineers out there. Close it and save it. And now when I go back and I open up my master file again, final project, right? And look how nice my file structure looks. All the X's are all together and the final project's up at the top, right? It's sorting very nicely. I hit open and I have all those things in there now. And they're overlapping, which wasn't great planning on my part, right? But I can just move them over, you know, make them nice and neat in my AutoCAD. Yep.
So moving these over in the master file would move them over in their own individual file.
Nope. Nope. It keeps it in the same spot in the individual file. So it doesn't really care where it's at in the master file. It's just reading the information. So you can move these around and it doesn't go backwards. It goes forward. Yeah. So I can move these around, but that's a good question, right? So I can move these around a little bit. It's like moving a block, right? When you move a block, it doesn't alter the original file. It just moves its spot in the current file. Okay, so these look really great, and then they think, oh, wait a minute, I want to change my floor plan. That doesn't quite look how I want it to look, right? So I go back and I open up my floor plan, and my backup files are starting to generate, right? Which is good. So if something happens to my original file, I have that. And I want to draw a few lines through my floor plan. Okay, I hit save, I close it out, I go back to my final master file, and there are those lines that I generated. Maybe these would be better oriented, kind of horizontal or vertical, right? Okay, so I have my files, and you can see I can go back and forth, and it updates in this master file, right? You will, do all of your work in your individual files, and then you will compile them here, and you'll print from here. You don't need to set up Paperspace in your individual base files. Doesn't make any sense, right? Because we're viewing all of that information in this one file, and we're printing everything from here, okay? Now, when I go to print, right, my cover sheet looks really good. I go to my site plan. I'm going to insert, I got my title block there, I bring it here. Somebody asked me, how do I get my title block centered in here, right? Well, it doesn't really matter, because as long as it's sitting within the margins here, and as long as when I go to print, I choose center the plot, that title block will always be centered on my page. So if it's slightly askew, like, a 1/4 of an inch here or there, it doesn't make a big difference. So now I'm just viewing this image here. I'm going to click, zoom out, and I want to capture my floor plan, right? Probably have to expand these pretty far. I'm going to click and make sure that this is on my viewport layer. Click. There's my floor plan. Click out. Click on the viewport, and I'm going to scale the viewport now. So I use my drop down or drop up, whatever, and choose 1/8 of an inch. Oh, not too small. So 1/4 of an inch, still too small. 1/2 inch is going to do it. So now I just need to pull it up a little, bring it down just a tiny bit, right? And there's my floor plan, okay? And I would do the same thing on each of these. So details, you can go in and you can insert your title block. Make sure my viewport is on the viewport layer. Expand this viewport, right? Click, zoom out, and this is my details. So there are my 2 details. Click on that. The viewport, scale it here. And again, I prefer to scale it through this menu. We talked about this a little bit in class, but what I like about scaling it this direction is that it takes the objects and scales it inside of the parameter you've established with your viewport. As opposed to this grip right here, you say, hey, I want this to be 3/8, and it bumps, or well, in this case, it bumped it down, but it can bump it up so that, it expands the viewport to show you how large it would need to be to achieve that scale, as opposed to allowing you to see what it would look like, in what you've specified as the parameter, essentially. All right, so that looks pretty good. I can kind of crop it in even just a tiny bit, right? This is on viewport. I made sure of that. If you accidentally put an XREF on viewport, it won't print, right? So if you get everything beautifully laid out, your drawings are done, you go to print and nothing is on your sheets, it's likely because you have inserted your XREFs on viewport, right? Or a non-printable layer. And so nothing is allowed to be viewed, right? So there are my details, Control P, preview that, and there we go. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to come in here, I'm going to save my file, of course, make sure you're saving often. I might suggest even, at specific intervals, but when you've completed a substantial portion of work, I would even make up a backup file somewhere, right? So take a zip drive that you don't use and grab all your files off your laptop, copy them, and put a copy on your zip drive, right? So that if something happens to your laptop or PC or whatever, then you have a copy of it elsewhere, right? every semester something happens. It's the nature of what we do, really, right? All right, any questions about that? Okay, so I'll stop there. On Monday, I'll talk a little bit about the floor plan. So if you want to come in and watch me work a little bit on the floor plan, I'll do a little bit of that on Monday. I will post this video. Laura's excited.